really a point for us to all look and think through. And with that, I think today's question, and I think for the past 2 days, we all have been discussing this issue, that how it is important. But the fact is, how do we do it actually? So we have with us today three people, and who have two of them who have been doing some kind of thinking about it, who have been looking at the practices on the ground. And then we have someone who has been practicing it. So it's a good mix of people who are there on the panel today. And so we will try and hear one by one. So we will start with Anubhav Pradhan. And Anubhav is primarily a researcher. He has been uh, writing, and he, by profession, he's a person who deals with literature, but his interests are much varied. He has been looking at the urban history, and he teaches currently urban literature at South Asian University. Uh, and he has been an urban fellow. So his concern is urban, how to reimagine urban spaces. And he will be speaking about imagining the periphery, planning and farming on the Yamuna floodplains. People, I'm saying it's important that the human history civilization is about history of rivers and the river basins, and most of the important cities have been founded on the river. Delhi is a river which we all know in what condition it is, like many rivers across the country. And I am here in Paris, and we have a river here too, and River Seine, and it's banked. It's like a big canal here. And this is something which I guess most of our politicians, when they come to West, they see these rivers and they think that yes, how rivers and river fronts can be modernized and seen as. But the character of rivers in the in India and West are very different. Perhaps our rivers are more live. They are living rivers than just rivers used for transportation and boats and cruising. And the worst example, what we can do with our rivers, is the Ahmedabad riverfront, Sabarmati riverfront. I won't go much into detail, but I think we will hear Anubhav that what has been his experiences around working on the Yamuna floodplains. So over to Anubhav now.
Thank you, Magadesh, and thank you, PFA, for this. Let me just quickly share my screen and start with my presentation. So my presentation is on a particular piece of land by the river Yamuna in Delhi. I'm asking primarily four research questions. A, that what is the history of farming along the Yamuna? How has modern planning shaped farming in this region? We often think of planning as a very urban sort of practice, but there is
अनुभव
enough.
प्रधान अपनी प्रस्तुति पे ये सवाल पूछना चाहेंगे कि यमुना के आसपास
What is
की
the
खेती
nature
का
of daily
इतिहास
life?
क्या है?
Is it directly
मॉडर्न
attributed to
प्लानिंग
is it
और
historically
फार्मिंग से
related,
इस
or is it
क्षेत्र
effective
का क्या
recreation
हुआ
of
है?
humans, and has farming always been illegal? How does gentrification and environmentalism, these are two key principles behind most of the planning happening in our times right now, how do these affect farming by the Yamuna floodplains? And finally, does a study like this allow us to think of other models of development? So let's quickly jump into that. Not too many of us who live in Delhi know much about the Yamuna. Not too many of us know what is actually by the Yamuna. We don't really have a very high level of interaction with the Yamuna in this city. Um, but there, if you were to actually walk along the river and there is around
दिल्ली के लोगों का यमुना नदी के साथ कोई डायरेक्ट
22 of the
रिलेशन
villages are from the
स्थापित
Yamuna
नहीं हो
region,
पाया है।
Okhla, which is called the urban
यमुना
core.
नदी दिल्ली में पल्ला क्षेत्र से
We
आती
use a
है।
lot of
उसके
farming
आसपास
typologies. You
कई
see institutional
गांव, खेत,
farming, and you
वर्षा जल
see
संचयन,
residential, unauthorized,
हदें,
authorized. You see greenhouses,
बायोडायवर्सिटी
farming.
रिवर्स, बर्ड सैंक्चुरी इत्यादि
The
हैं।
site where I have been
साथ
working
ही
on
कई
in a research
बस्तियां,
area is a
पावर
place
प्लांट,
called
धार्मिक
Bela
स्थल,
Estate.
मेट्रो इत्यादि भी
Two
हैं।
major revenue estates. Revenue estates is a British sort of terminology from the
बेला
Bureau of
एस्टेट
Revenue
लगभग
and Inland
595
Taxes, which was started in
एकड़ का है। वह दिल्ली में
Bela
यमुना के
Estate
घाट
is
पर
on the
स्थित
western
4 राजस्व संप्रदा में से
side of
एक
the
है।
Yamuna.
बेला
If
एस्टेट
those of you who know
यमुना के
Delhi, it
पश्चिमी
starts
पठार
from
और लाल किले के
Lohapur,
पास स्थित
and
है।
then
वर्तमान में
you
इसके चारों
if you
तरफ
go right,
लोहा
and then
पुल, स्वर्ण
Yamuna is on
जयंती पार्क, आईटीओ बैराज और रिंग रोड बाईपास है। इसमें स्थित कॉलोनीज हैं चाइना कॉलोनी, मल्ला गांव, मूलचंद बस्ती, बेलागांव और कंचनपुरी। अगर आप अपने स्क्रीन पर देखेंगे तो आपको मैप में बेला स्टेट दिखाई दे रहा होगा।
So my very quick introduction to this site also is that this is where farming has been happening for around 70 years now in some form of
बेला स्टेट में करीब 70 साल से खेती की जा रही है।
but there are people constantly keep banging these numbers that there are around 5,000 to 10,000 farmers in this area. But the point of interest which I have is that it's not as if land is an immutable idea. That the Bega estate in its current form did not even exist before the early 20th century. The course of the Yamuna has changed considerably over the past 150 years. And initially, initially, as in when you have the beginning of modern planning after the mutiny of 1857, Bega is what is roughly where you have the ISBT and where you have parts of the civil line. So where the inner ring road joins Sarinder is what roughly used to be Bega. After the mutiny, it was taken over by the British, became government property. Soon after, it was given to the forest department to be used as a fuel plantation. And then the municipal committee of Delhi was given the land along with all other Nazrul lands. Somewhere around before the First World War, it was acquisitioned by the army to use as a fodder farm. Roughly around that time, and if you remember, the Delhi Darbar also happened in 1911. Roughly around that time, the banks of the Yamuna sort of shifted, and there was more land which came along the Red Fort. And then in
बेला
19
स्टेट 21वीं सदी से पहले उपस्थित नहीं था और हर समय की स्थानीय सरकारों ने यमुना और उसके कछारों पर पैसा कमाने और स्वच्छता से जुड़े कार्यों के लिए अपने वश में ही रखने की कोशिश की है।
charge of all this land in 1956. So the idea of looking at this history is to think of how land ownership and land usage has changed over the past 150 years. It's not as
बेला
if
स्टेट का
there
यूसेज
is a single
और
national
गवर्नेंस
activity which has been
पिछले कई
established
सालों में चेंज
by
होता आया है।
riverine land.
डीडीए के
And
पास
in
इस
this
क्षेत्र
activity,
का
this land
अधिकार
owning
विरासत में मिला है और
land by the river is something that we should
वह
keep in
उसे
mind when we plan
23 नजूल एस्टेट में में
when
से
we
एक
think of
मानता है।
urban planning in terms of institutions.
1949 से 1966
The first
तक 5-5 साल तक
institution to start planning
लीज
was the Delhi Improvement Club
वहां के रहने
in
वाले लोगों को
49,
मिलता
2 years
आया
after
है।
partition. The, at that time, there was a Grow More Food campaign also happening in the city. During the Second World War, there were massive food shortages, and the British government was encouraging Indian cities to become self-reliant and resilient and to manage their own supplies. So, Peasants Cooperative Society, the Delhi Peasants Cooperative Multi-Purpose Society was formed roughly around 1947 and 48, and that land was given on a 5-year lease to the Peasants Cooperative Society. The lease expired, it was renewed, and when it expired in 1966, it was the Cooperative Society was asked to hand over, but as such things happened, there was no
1966 में यह लीज का नवीकरण नहीं हुआ था।
activity. And it's only in 1991 that eviction notices were issued under the Public Premises Act. In 2004 and 6, the Yamuna Pushta demolitions happened. Interestingly, most of my respondents said that at that time the slums were demolished, the jhuggi jhopis were demolished, but the farmers and their houses and their farms were not demolished. The zonal plan for the Yamuna riverfront, for what we now say Zone O, was approved in 2010, and I don't know if there's a connection, but the first demolition in Bega escaped. The first demolition against farmers in Bega escaped started in 2010.
2010 में पहली बार किसानों के
In a final judgment on a lot of
खेतों और घरों
petitions,
को
the National
गिराया
Assembly
गया था।
gradually banned vegetable farming along the
2015 में एनजीटी ने
and last year in October,
सब्जी उपजाने
the
पर
NGT
पाबंदी
approved
लगा दी
DDA to
थी।
evict all farmers by 1st April. or giving
और
a very high
2019 में
value to the
एनजीटी
farmers.
ने डीडीए को कहा
In
है
a way,
कि
I guess
1 अप्रैल
definitely
2020
has
तक
been beneficial for the
हर
farmers because
किसानों
it has been
को
beneficial them in
बेला
two
एस्टेट
ways.
छोड़ना होगा।
Most farmers grow vegetables which are sold on both sides of the Yamuna. They are sold in a local mandi in Jhirpur
बेला
only,
एस्टेट में
and they are
उपजने
sold in
वाले
Saran as well.
सब्जी ज्यादातर मंडियों में
Um,
बिके जाते हैं।
Very few farmers grow. Some of them grow paddy and rice. Sorry, paddy and wheat. A lot of them also grow flowers which are used supplied to the various wholesalers in the city. But over the past almost a decade now, but this is the
2010 से 2016
recently
तक
for
करीब
Guwahati,
25 बार
that 25
किसानों के घरों को
demonstrations have been
गिराया गया
carried
है।
out against these farmers from 2010 to 2016. And what seems to be at stake here is uh, is an aspirational idea of the city in which what seems to be at stake is an aspirational idea of the city of what the floodplain should be like. So the Yamuna Riverfront Development Project has very clear ideas of gentrifying and making the riverfront very friendly for tourists. The idea of public good and public and community service in a way is to take away all the farming activity and to replace that with tourist facilities, with recreational areas, with biodiversity reserves, and so on and so forth.
यमुना रिवर फ्रंट
And this happens
डेवलपमेंट
to be
प्रोजेक्ट के माध्यम से
this park. So the whole area
सरकार
means
ऐसा शहर बनाना
there is this
चाहती है
society of
जो
Birlas.
विश्व स्तरीय हो,
And you
स्वच्छता
can
हो
see
जहाँ,
this
लेकिन
picture
किसानी
there from the
या
previous
उससे
slide. You
जुड़े
can show
काम
here.
ना हो,
This is
वह एक
this is the
पर्यटन के
boundary
लिए
of Bela Estate,
आकर्षित
and
जगह बन सके।
this is so there are 5 communities here right now, and most of the residents of those communities are farmers. There is no mention of farming in the plan as you can see right now.
जैसा कि हम मैप में
There's
देख
no
सकते
plan
हैं,
in
यहाँ
which
पर
is
रहने
mentioned
यमुना के
farming. There's a
आसपास
plan
रहने
mentioning
वाले लोगों
walkways and
और
trails and
किसानों
blah blah
के
blah.
बारे में इस प्रोजेक्ट के
Whereas
के अंदर कुछ भी नहीं लिखा गया
the
है।
idea is that the premise is as if this is a tabula rasa, as if there is nothing there, this is empty land, and it can be taken over and reshaped in keeping with this aspirational idea of what the 21st century Indian city, of what the capital of India should look like. And I'm going to end soon now. The point which I'm trying to make very quickly through this is that riverine land is not stable and immutable. So when we plan, we usually take land as a very stable quality. And if you think of property regimes also, property laws are made on the basis of land not being changed. But rivers by default change, they post changes, right? And so we must have a different conceptualization of
इन
floodplain.
सभी बातों का यह
We can't
निष्कर्ष
be
निकलता
planning
है
all in the same way as we
कि
planned
स्थानीय
other times.
सरकारों ने यमुना और उसके कछारों
Then
पर
there have been multiple
पैसा
agencies,
कमाने और
including
स्वच्छता से
like
जुड़े
Delhi
कार्यों के लिए
Development
अपने
Trust,
वश में ही
like
रखने की
the NADU
कोशिश की
office,
है।
like Delhi Development
और
Trust.
जब ऐसी
And
जगहों
then
पर
there is
निर्णय
like
होता
the
है
Office
तो
of the
वह
Committee of Delhi,
तो
which
वह यह
also
कार्य
minister
सिर्फ
to the current
उच्च स्तर के लोग ही
municipal
करते हैं और
corporations of
स्थानीय
MP.
आबादी को दूर
Many
रखा जाता
agencies
है।
have held charge of Bela Estate. Um,
ऐसे लोग जो
in
बेला स्टेट
in the
जैसे यमुना के
1930s and
कछारों
40s,
पर
farming
लीगली
was
रह रहे थे
initiated.
अभी तक
And if you
और
speak to
शहर की
the
भोजन
farmers of
पूर्ति कर
Bela
रहे थे,
Estate right now,
उन
many of
पर
them
अब
will tell
कब्जा
you that
होने लगा है और
uh,
प्रदूषित
the
करने
original
का आरोप
proprietor,
लगाया जा
the
रहा है।
people who were asked
बल्कि वह
to
ऐसे
organize this whole
ऐसा शहर
process
बनाना
at the time
चाहते
of
हैं जो
park
विश्व
setting.
स्तरीय हो, जहाँ
And with three
स्वच्छता
main
हो
ideas, most
और
better
किसानी
livelihood
और
for
उससे जुड़े
citizens,
काम ना हो।
better food security,
वह एक
and
पर्यटन के लिए
revenue
आकर्षित
generation for
जगह
the city.
बनाना चाहते हैं।
But if you
यह हमें
compare
दर्शाता है कि
how
शहर की
planning has
प्लानिंग
been,
करते समय
these
कैसे
principles of
ऐसे
transition
लोगों को अलग
from
कर दिया
revenue and
जाता है,
hygiene,
हाशिए पर कर दिया
these are
जाता है।
main principles for planning for the floodplain, to an aspirational kind of gentrification where you do not put much merit on farms, but you think that there is greater merit in having parks and tourist facilities and walkways and so on. The result is that farmers have been criminalized as not only encroachers but also polluters. They are not only are they encroaching on government land and therefore they are unscrupulous, but they are also polluting the Yamuna. And what I'm trying to argue with this very quickly and through other kinds of interventions is that there are alternate planning models available to reconcile farming with urban aspirations. Yesterday, my co-panelists spoke about how more and more of urban citizens want to farm now. More and more people want to know where their food is coming from. And we have within a city like Delhi also a history and a state sanctioned history of cooperative farming, of various kinds of people coming together and farming in a way which was regulated by the state. We have, as a society, perhaps lost the appetite for that. Our government agencies no longer consider it necessary or beneficial for cities. But I think there is an alternate model available and it is worthwhile to explore it. Thank you.
Uh, Thanks a lot, Anubhav, for taking us through. I think it's a very interesting presentation in terms of just looking at how we look at the cities. And I think this changing perception towards cities, the cities does not mean a place where any farming happens. That is something definitely needs to change because and this mindset about cities are where there is no farming, it's people where only service class remains there, and it's for their enjoyment, the city as the city of joy we talk about. And I think it's important to see how Delhi over a period of time had changed. In 1990s onwards, if we see that has changed much more. Fortunately, India, we are blessed with many of the cities have of different rivers, and most of them have rivers. So I think that's something really good for us. We listened to Anubhav about how Delhi floodplains have changed. The next presenter in line we have
हमने
Vishal.
अभी अनिल प्रधान को बैग
Engineer by
की
training,
प्रस्तुति सुनी
also has turned
और
farmer
हमारे
into
अगले
farmer, and he has started
प्रस्तुत
looking
करने
into
वाले
how farming can
स्पीकर
be done,
विशाल
farming in
शौकीन हैं।
modern ways, innovating and bringing
वह
India to
पहले एक
rural.
इंजीनियर
So it's
थे
very
जो अब
inspiring to
किसान बन गए
experiment with
हैं।
a number of things in his enterprise. If you talk in modern lingo, then it's kind of a startup, social enterprise, and agri
दिल्ली के
enterprise.
पल्ला गांव
And
में
we
उनका
call it
एक
agri
पॉलीहाउस
business. Even though
फार्म
he's
है। वह
studying,
कई तरीके की फसल
he's
उगाते
doing
हैं,
a master's
जैसे
in
अन्न,
agriculture
बड़े
with us.
पैमाने के लिए
But
सब्जी
so he's
और
a farmer,
एक्सोटिक
he's an
सब्जियां,
engineer, he's also a student,
ऑर्नामेंटल
and he's an active
या
speaker in
सजावटी
Kisan Union.
पौधे
Welcome,
और
Vishal,
लैंडस्केपिंग
and
पौधे।
over to you to take us through the experience of farming within Delhi. How is it for you?
Thanks for the introduction, Madhuresh. I'll just quickly begin with my presentation about the benefits of urban agriculture in the modern Indian societies. I'll quickly take you up with the agenda for today. We'll be talking about urban agriculture at the global level
हम
and the
विश्व स्तर पर शहरी
which
कृषि
was
के
facing
बारे में
benefit
बात
available
करेंगे।
across the world. Following that, we'll be discussing briefly about the post-colonial era of the India with respect to food security and how the growth trends have been impacted by
इसके अलावा हम पोस्ट
urban
कॉलोनियल कार्य जो कि
and
शहरी
the
कृषि से
irrigation
जुड़े हुए
technology.
हैं उनके बारे में बात करेंगे।
How has the globalization and technology impacted the Indian agriculture? We'll be briefly discussing about that as well. The recent trends that have been flooding up in the Indian markets recently, within the last decade itself.
और अभी हाल फिलहाल में
Before
जो
moving
नए
to challenges and futures
तरीके आ
of
रहे हैं
urban
शहरी
agriculture,
कृषि से जुड़े
we'll
हुए,
be
हम
finally
उनके बारे में
concluding
भी
with
बात
the
करेंगे और
farming.
अंत में इसका निष्कर्ष निकालेंगे।
Vishal, sorry to interrupt you. You haven't shared your screen. If you can do so, that would be helpful.
Oh, okay. I'll just share the screen. Is it visible to everyone?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. So the agenda, as I've already discussed, it would be urban agriculture at global level, India in the post-colonial era, the impact of globalization and technology on the urban agriculture, recent trends, the chemical-free movement, challenges and future scopes of urban agriculture in a city like Delhi, and then we'll be concluding with the dairy farm. Urban agriculture, as we all know, is a very vague idea. So I'd be defining it briefly with the fact that what an urban area and what a peri-urban area is considered as. As we can see, the urban agriculture happens in the cities and the areas around the periphery of it. And the peri-urban areas would be somewhere around between the range of 20 kilometers from the city boundaries. But the FAO stat and the World Bank statistics say that
स्पीकर अभी अर्बन और पेरी अर्बन एरियाज के बारे में बता रहे हैं। अर्बन एरिया वह होते हैं जो शहर के अंदर होते हैं और पेरी अर्बन एरिया वो जो शहर के बाहर के 20 किलोमीटर दायरे में आए।
depends on the people's habit of what peri-urban area their food grows in and what their demand is for the future. And we also have the control environment farming, which I am currently practicing at my own farm in Delhi. We'll be discussing briefly about that as well. What we have is the we'll be discussing about the ideal system of how a urban farming system should function as. I'll take a brief example of Singapore for that. First, let's discuss this diagram. It states that we must have a digitalized food supply
विशाल
chain
शौकीन उदाहरण के लिए
farm to the
सिंगापुर का
peri-urban as well as the urban
एग्जाम्पल दे
areas,
रहे हैं, जिसमें एक
where
बेहतरीन शहरी कृषि
acts as a direct link
के
between
बारे
the
में
production
बता
side
रहे
as
हैं।
well as the consumption hubs of the city. It should be digitized, it should be very intensely optimized so as to ensure returning of the essential nutrients and the food waste,
ऐसे शहरी
especially the
कृषि में
nutrient related and
डिजिटलाइज्ड
organic food waste,
फूड सप्लाई चेन
directly
होना
to be returned
चाहिए।
back to the farms.
अर्बन और
And it
पेरी
was not
अर्बन
created
दोनों
to
जगहों
for
पर
further
खेती होनी
cultivation of
चाहिए।
crops. Can be then further utilized by regenerative agriculture, which uses the waste, converts it into usable manure,
जो वेस्ट
compost,
पैदा
and
होता है शहरों में, उसका भी
other usable
उपयोग
forms of
करना चाहिए।
agricultural inputs, so that we have a very
तकनीकों का
efficient,
इस्तेमाल
efficient
करके
resource management
साधन
and efficient
और उत्पादन
growing
दोनों में
practices.
बढ़ोतरी करनी
Can
चाहिए।
be or cannot be managed by technical aspects of the entire scenario of farming. It requires it does not require a lot of technical inputs. It doesn't require a lot of technology, and it doesn't require complex engineering. It is just a
डिजिटली
basic system of lifestyle that
लोग
farmers are
अपने
supposed to following, giving back to the land
नॉलेज
what
भी
they
एक
take
दूसरे
from
से
the land.
शेयर कर सकते हैं।
Further, more about that, we have to have a digital knowledge sharing basis, the data sharing basis as well between the different stakeholders of the food supply chain network. Because as we collect more and more data, if we cannot do anything about it, then we are not going to be able to make a very drastic change in the system. So efficient data sharing and data collection is a must for ensuring a very robust, very diligent food supply chain network between the urban, peri-urban, and the rural areas. I'll give you an example of the vertical farming systems that are currently operating
यह
in
एक
the
बड़ी खेती
food
का
supply chain,
उदाहरण
where
है।
the people are using rooftops of multiple buildings and old warehouses and abandoned buildings to grow vegetables, microgreens, and other exotic horticultural crops which are used in the hospitality industry for a very long time. Earlier, which used to be imported and used to cost a fortune to the importers as well as the end consumer as well. In India, the post-colonial era saw the change in concentration of urban population from the rural areas to the urban areas. Initially, which was thought to be somewhere around 18% of the population density of the entire country, has now come up to be more than 34% of the population living in the urban areas as opposed to the rural areas. It has been further projected by the World Bank and the FAO to reach about 50% by the end of the year 2050, which means it would put more pressure on the land, more pressure on the growers, and more pressure on the government as well to provide food for the ever-growing and ever-migrating population of India. However, what we have observed currently in the recent trends of the agriculture is that the area under irrigation, the total area of the percentage of the agricultural land in India has been increasing, which has been directly correlated with the irrigation schemes set up by the government, linking of canals, linking of rivers, and setting up of irrigation units in different areas of the farming, where the farming is concentrated, which is generally just by the banks of a river. Food production in India, it has gradually grown over the period of last 50 years or so. India primarily relying on traditional ways of cultivation, chemical free, without any artificial and synthetic inputs. But with the onset of Green Revolution during the period of 70s and 80s, the government provided a lot of subsidies and different schemes for the farmers and the growers in India so as to supplement their farm income and increase the yield, which exponentially shot up the yields of India of more than 140 million metric tons of goods being produced and being exported out of India in a single financial year. But that hasn't stopped India from facing the problem of food shortage and availability of nutrients for the population, especially in the urban and peri-urban areas. Caused a lot of migration of people from the rural India to the more more developed, more resourceful urban and peri-urban areas, which has caused a lot of problems for the farming sector as well. It has caused shortage of labor, it has caused shortage of skilled labor per se for farming and for food cultivation. And because of that shortage, the yield has significantly gone down, and we are facing the problem of food shortage in the cities, which is why the concept of urban farming and peri-urban farming comes into picture, where people have started to set up kitchen gardens, community gardens, and rooftop gardens so as to supplement their uh, daily food requirements, which is not really completely dependable, because a food staple, for example, food grains that we are consuming now, they cannot be grown at a very small scale, small piece of land. It requires scalability. It requires a huge section of land to produce enough food grains to provide food and nutrition for the 135 crore people in India. Globalization and technology, with people traveling abroad, people traveling to different parts of the globe for leisure, education, employment, etc. They have developed a taste of the exotic and oriental as well as continental markets as well. With the hotels consuming about 50% of the exotic vegetable markets, it is a very huge chunk of the production as well as the imports that goes into the hospitality industry, with multiple hotels coming into picture. Restaurants also contribute about 30% of the consumption of exotic vegetables, which are produced in localized hubs all across the country. It is not wide scale. It is mostly in the mountains as well as the areas which have suitable climate for growing these crops. Others would be households. Households contribute about 20% of the consumption of exotic vegetables, which has been about a 500% increase in the last 5 years, which is unprecedented, because the growth of exotic vegetable consumption in India was a very steady growth scale of somewhere about 80-70% annually. But 500% growth in 5 years is an exceptional growth, especially for the exotic vegetables, which comes into picture that many people have invested huge amounts of money in localized areas so as to grow these exotic vegetables. People are still having the perception that these vegetables would be imported from somewhere, whereas they would be growing locally in some corner of the country, which has to be traveled back to the city for the people to consume it. The recent trends in India, as we are currently observing, would be rooftop gardening, that is being followed as a recreational hobby for a lot of people that are living in urban and peri-urban areas. But the main constraints of that would be availability of land, as well as the scalability of the entire system itself. Kitchen gardens are the same problems that people face. It is not scalable, and it is sufficient for a small family, but it's not sufficient for a very large family. Collaborative farming is a new concept, and it's fairly unreachable for the people, because first of all, the availability of vacant land in the urban boundaries is very less, and people are not able to collaborate with other landowners so as to start a collaborative farming venture in the piece of land, which makes this option fairly restricted to a few sections of the society. The e-commerce and the digital connectivity, it has enabled people to order their groceries and their foods online, which makes them even more alien to the concept of the food miles that the one section of the meal of their day travels. Farmers markets is a very good initiative by the people that are connecting farmers directly to the end consumer itself, eliminating the middlemanship and the commission agents nexus that is basically ripping off the farmers of their hard-earned money and their produce so as to make different profits in their professional ventures. The chemical-free movement in India has recently seen a spike in population, the section of the population that is health conscious, that is being aware of where their food comes from, how is it grown, who is growing it, and how much distance has it traveled. Which comes to the fact that the digital awareness and the social media movement has spiked the rise in the population of the section of population which is conscious about their eating habits, which has made them spend more and more money to procure chemical-free, organic, as well as different healthy vegetables, which were completely alien to our diets, let's say a decade ago. The challenges and future scopes of urban agriculture in India are the land use change, the change of land use pattern, city planning, uh, change of land use policies, for example, declaring of agricultural land into residential and commercial spaces, land fragmentation because of segmented division of the land between the two farmers. It is causing a lot of problem for the urban and the peri-urban farming across the big cities of India. The land holding of particular farmers are getting smaller and smaller, which is reducing the overall production of the vegetables or of the food crop, which is essential for the market. And it is a future challenge that needs to be coped up with governmental policies with regards to not allowing the fragmentation of the land aggregation, and collaborative farming for the people. The availability of a skilled labor is quite big a problem in India. India, as you all know, it's completely opposite from what the global cases and the global scenarios are. India has abundance of labor, but the availability of skilled labor is still a problem, and people are not ready to invest in improving the skills of their employed laborers because the end revenues are not up to the mark. The governmental policies, endless bureaucracy, and unclear governmental policies about agriculture, peri-urban agriculture, urban farming, and lack of support from the lawmakers has actually hampered the growth of this very nascent sector of urban farming, which is still at the early ages of its growth. Given proper guidance, if given proper support, and if given proper education, the sector has potential to roughly compensate about 30% of what we consume in a city. The cost of production of the urban and peri-urban cultivation systems is quite high initially. It does not require complex engineering, but the entire process of setting up of equipment and the maintenance of the system with artificial or natural resources for the plants, it's quite expensive. It's quite time consuming as well. And it requires a lot of efforts from the people. So it has been still limited to a very small section of the society where people are currently doing it majorly for recreational purpose or for self-help benefits.
We have 2 more minutes, so if you could try and finish. Yeah, thanks.
The problem of waste management of the organic waste generated, we still do not have prominent channels, and we do not have diligent networks for the organic food waste from the cities to be returned back to the farm in a way that it can be used for further cultivation. The waste management system, currently about 60% of the waste that is being generated in a city like Delhi ends up in landfills and ends up being contaminated by furthermore chemicals that are dumped in the landfills, rendering it completely useless for further cultivation. And the concept and the problem of scaling up of the system, because of the lack of land and lack of resources available to the people, the scaling up of the system is very difficult and a very expensive process, and it does not guarantee complete food security. The crop variety that can be grown in urban and peri-urban sections is very limited because the growth of food grains and other staples that are required in everybody's daily diet require huge chunks of land for production, since the yield is not as much. But the growth of horticultural crops, mass consumption vegetables is very viable and very workable in a peri-urban and urban area. A single rooftop garden of about 200 square feet is enough to supplement the daily vegetable needs of a family of 4 members. The way ahead would be, as we all know, awareness and education of the people. People are still not aware of where their food comes from. People still do not know what goes into farming, how much effort it takes for a person to grow the food that they consume every day. They have to be dependent on a farmer for at least thrice a day for their meals, but people are still ignorant to the fact how their food is grown and where it comes from. So awareness is a must. Planning and directional growth, as well as the legal support from the government, the city planning, allocation of community lands to the recently developed cities, directional growth, basically mandating rooftop gardening, rainwater harvesting, or any other sort of gardening over the rooftops or abandoned buildings can be promoted by the government, which will further improve the urban agriculture. Because as we know, urban agriculture has proven to be beneficial for improving the quality of air that a city breathes in, because it absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide and other nitrogen and sulfur pollutants from the air and makes it cleaner for the people, as a dual benefit of cleaning the air as well as providing food for the community while maintaining the food security of the population itself. Food theaters is a very new concept that is being developed in various countries where people are allowed to interact with their food, with their growers, and they get to know about where the produce comes from, and it presents live, let's say, live demonstration of how the food is grown, where is it coming from, makes people more aware and more conscious about where the food is coming from and their diets. Inclusive growth, it requires interaction between the urban as well as the rural sector of the farming, because inclusive growth is a must. Both of the systems cannot exist without one another, and they have to be interdependent and function like a well-cocked machinery to ensure the food security, which is the problem that India will shortly be facing within the next 10 to 15 years, because the current rate of growth of population predicts the world population to grow at about 9.5 billion by the year 2050. And the entire world requires about 1.5 times more land to cultivate the food if it continues in the same way. Lastly, labor use and not abuse. People should be conscious about who is working at the farms to produce their food. They should not be, they have their social rights. They should be given job security, as well as they should be given education as well as training, so as to improve their employability as well as improve the efficiency of the entire production system itself. And lastly, a few pictures about a day at the farm. This is what a morning looks like. This is the first day when the seedling pops out of the seed in a growth medium, and then it is transplanted into the fields. It comes up to the harvest. That's my niece in the picture. And this is the joy that city people experience when they come to a farm, because being locked in a room between four walls takes a toll on someone's mental health. And going out to the farm, going out to the outskirts of the city, breathing the clean air does prove beneficial for people's mental health as well. The harvests, the controlled environment for growth of exotic vegetables is being displayed here. The exotic crops are separately packaged in different packaging forms, which generates further more waste in the cities, as well as ends up filling the landfills even more. And with this, we conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishal, for taking us through your farm. And for those who missed, the farm is in Palla village, which is in the northwest of Delhi. And thanks also for this interesting presentation where you took us through. I think the very interesting for me was the fact that you looked at the food market. And it is true that there is a big food market and how everybody is trying to respond to that. But the effort of this webinar series is also to explore different approaches towards this and the market as such. I think it's for everybody else to interpret and see how you approach addressing the food systems. So thank you for taking us through that. And we now hear from Jagriti. Jagriti is a research scholar at Jawaharlal Nehru University. And she has been looking at how the hunger, the questions of her specific interests look at food, hunger, and environmental issues. And she'll be taking us through some of the, I think, the burning questions on this issue and where the new technology in terms of some of which I think Vishal also touched upon. So she'll be taking us through the innovations which are going on in this field. So over to Jagriti now, and then we will have some questions and answers. Thanks.
Thank you so much and good afternoon, everyone. So my topic is developing farming culture in urban centers of India with shrinking spaces. So the thing is that I don't have a first-hand hand into all this. So what I have done is I did a qualitative writing with sort of some secondary data. So basically I have tried to link the whole issue of farming with the food security issues. So growing urbanization, shrinking spaces. Globally, due to basically in this thing, what I have introduced is that historically the whole thing of farming has started. So I have tried to trace historically that how the farming culture evolved in South Asian context, which is from the Harappan civilization. So the intensive agriculture first started into a first urban town, which is known as Harappa. After that, it has gradually transformed. We have become, before that only, we have become from a food gatherer to a food cultivator. So basically, what my point here is that how the globally there is a climatic change, there is a population increase due to which the food crisis and the situation of hunger is really increasing, which one could witness in the time of pandemics when we are suffering from a major and huge food crisis. Need of the hour. So as we know that even the farmers, they don't want to do the normal food crops farming. They want their own profits, because of which they are moving towards other, like I have written here, they want to do other cash crops farming, and also they don't want their next generation to indulge in those kind of farming because they think that it's a disrespected work. Need of the hour. So the need of the hour, basically, I'm giving more importance to the infrastructural thing which we require in a third world country like India. So today we need farming within the walls. So the need of the hour is that we start with a blend of technology and traditional knowledge within our walls. So we shouldn't leave our traditional knowledge at the back, but we should also blend it together. The technology and tradition should come in hand. So everybody knows about kitchen garden, but we today what we need is that we need a massive output for which we need to do more. Methods which can bring maximum output. So there are few methods where first we need to make a city which is sustainable city. And as I could see that Vishal is an engineer, but still he is doing some. He is working as a farmer, which led me to come into the next point, which is sustainable engineers. So there are sustainable engineers who wants to make sustainable cities which will be self-reliant in providing food crops. This will basically, I'm talking about the concept of vertical farming, sky farming, where there will be multi-story buildings which will be used as greenhouses, and which will also have a elevated platform. Like it will be built upon an elevated platform or on pillars, where the other stories, like the first floor, the second floor, could be used for farming of the crops. But while the below the platforms could be used for residential purposes. So the people who are doing farming, they could also have a place to stay, and also can make proper house setting up within that whole structure of the building. Also, we can. So I was looking at. So there are different farming techniques which are being practiced in America, in Singapore, in other places like hydropolis farming, aeropolis farming, and aquapolis farming. So hydropolis is they are using water in such a way that within the water they can actually grow uh, food materials. And in aeropolis is that they can uplift that, and in air they can produce these farm products, while aquapolis is a combination of aquatic animals plus edible seaweeds, which are still being researched. So after all this, when we are talking about all the architecture and everything, there are also constraints and the problems which are faced by the urban farming. So there are the issues of the land, which everybody was talking about, that we have a land issue, we are not getting land. So that was one thing which I saw around, and also there's a shrinking spaces, of course. Because of that, land is an issue. This is a soil erosion is there. So these are the problems which basically we face. The second issue is of course the climate control, because within the wall, it's very difficult to control natural climatic conditions like the sunlight, the rain, the air, etc., which are really important for a plant to grow. The issue of full-time power supply, especially in a third world country like India, the issue of power supply is a major issue. The fourth problem is water supply. Again, India suffers from a massive water supply problem. especially given the thing that the urban farming will happen in cities which already suffer from water crunch. Then therefore, of course, because of the hydroponic farming and aquaponic farming, there will be a lot of water crunch. And above all, the another problem which could be faced is of the financial burden, because uh, the government has to be ready for that, the people has to be ready for that, the farmers have to be ready for that, that whatever they are doing, they have the finance to do it. So the recommendations, so I'm not just doing a problem oriented thing, but I'm also trying to give some recommendations or the probable solutions which we can try to find out. On the issue of land accessibility, we can do one thing, that we can have we can, first of all, we can make a vertical farming, that is a sky farming thing, as I said, one story, second story, third, fourth. So we can do at each level, we can do a different kind of farming. Also, there will be an elevated platform where people can also stay, they can make their own houses. The second thing which I was going around Noida, then I saw that there are so many abandoned, or the ghost towns, which you can say. So there are so many abandoned buildings around our places which could be used for these plantation techniques. The second thing about the climate and the temperature control, we can use LED lights. So these lights with solar panels and windmills and biofuels could be used in these greenhouse barges, because LED has a property to relatively cool down. At the same time, it manages the temperature, and also it has wave bands, which gives enough light and wide spectrum of lights. The water issue, of course, the water issue is always there. So we need to come up with another solution, like rainwater harvesting is important, reuse, reduce, and recycle of water. Ozone treated wastewater is good, because in that way the ozone treated wastewater could be used again in farming, and it can be used for plants. Finally, about the financial obstacle, I couldn't find much, but it is that there should be a cost effective techniques which will not burden the people, as well as the government is ready to pour in money for the farmers. So this is the thing which I came around. This is the vertical farming methods. And this is what I was talking about, how a vertical farming building could be, where at each level, one can plant different things. Like there's cherries, there's strawberries, there's cabbages, there are apples. So each level, the people can plant different things. And in the base side, because I couldn't show that in the picture. So in the base side, the people can build their homes, they can stay there. So this way we can solve the problem of land use. Finally, in the conclusion, I would like to say that we really need to look towards the innovative approaches, because now scientific technology is really important than only the traditional knowledge, because as the population is expanding, the land has become an issue, the water has become an issue. So we need water retention plans and water retention kind of farming. And also the WHO has come up with certain guidelines which focus on crop selection. They focus on such type of crops which doesn't take a lot of water, where there is hygiene, which is free of harmful chemicals. And also when we do such kind of farming, what it does is that it gives soil soil few time to replenishes itself. So when we are doing farming within the walls, the soil get time to get itself replenish its minerals, so that we can do farming again on that. So, but there are few questions which are still remaining, is that the feasibility of urban farming in a country like India, where technology, of course, the technology is lacking, its financial constraints are still there, and the whole thing is still in an experimental phase. Whether we are able to do it or not, it's still a questionable thing, and also it is in a very experimental phase, that whether India is ready to make such huge kind of buildings or not. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jagriti, for taking us through new approaches. And I think there is a lot of food for thought. And I'm sure at the same time, the questions of equity, the questions of are we looking at birth of a new set of farmers in the city? And I think what would be the future of a new farmer? Because I think coming from a very rural society, we think of farmers and the moment we think of a farmer, we think of a very different image of farmer and the agrarian crisis with which we are going on, with the country is facing. So I think what you have presented and what looks like, and I think something which Vishal was also referring to, it was showing us a different picture. And I think what are things to come? I'm not sure if everybody agrees to that, but I think it's a good mirror and it's a good way to look at things. And I think this presentation actually shows us the way where things could be going and what different directions in which research and things are going on. And thank you all three for your wonderful presentation and giving us a lot of things to think through. There are questions which have come in, and I would urge everyone who is listening to us or seeing us on the webinar, that there is a question and answer box. If you can type your questions there, that will be good. And if you cannot type, then just write there that you would like to make a short intervention, a minute or two, then I'll ask Nishant if they can unmute you or you can speak if that's possible. I don't know about the possibilities of this new format, but for now I will ask Nishant if you could read the questions which have come in and to who they are addressed.
Thanks, Madhurish, for moderating this session. Before we go to the Q&A session, as usual, I would make a request on behalf of the organizing committee and especially Institute for Democracy and Sustainability. As you're all aware, COVID lockdown has brought some of the most vulnerable people in our society under the most life-threatening conditions. Many of the participants in our research, which we presented on the day one, and some of the people who were present in the presentations today are currently facing serious problems in meeting their daily needs. We have been in touch with many of the farmers and farm laborers, fisher folk, and other migrant worker families. We are coordinating some of the mutual aid work for them. I request you to donate for this cause. The details will be available in the chat box, and it will also be sent you over email. Thank you for your attention. Now we can go to the Q&A session. We can first take up the questions which are typed in the Q&A box. The first question, which is there by Shweta Sundar, this is a general question. Till now, most of the solutions for urban farming are very technology and money intensive. For a farmer to be an equal collaborator in these initiatives, don't they require fundamental skill development? Otherwise, less tech intensive measures might have to be sought for. I think this was a question to, Vishal. If Vishal can respond to this question.
Hello, Madhurish. I cannot actually see the question on my screen. Could you please repeat the question? I was trying to listen to the.
Nishant, can you repeat that question for Vishal?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Oh, sir. Okay, this is a general question. Till now, most of the solutions for urban farming are very technology and money intensive. For a farmer to be an equal collaborator in these initiatives, don't they require fundamental skill development? Otherwise, less tech intensive measures might have to be sought for.
Okay, it's actually a very good question. As I mentioned in my presentation as well, urban agriculture does not have to be technologically advanced or does not have to involve a lot of engineering or technical inputs in it. You can start by as little as a recycled plastic bucket and a soil from a garden nearby or a public park nearby your place. And you can start with that and you can develop your interest for impact. Of course, the other systems that are available for urban farming, for example, hydroponics, aquaponics, and aeroponics, the other systems that are prevalent for urban farming these days, they are cosmetically very beautiful and they're visually appealing. That's why people are very attracted to it, but it is not required. you have a proper piece of land, if you have proper soil for you to grow your vegetables or your food in, you do not actually require these systems for growing your own food. You can rely back on the traditional methods that are available for farming. There is a lot of literature available on how to grow your crops. You can easily do it in your balcony. It does not have to require a huge section of land for you to grow your own vegetables. You can start small if you feel comfortable, and if you are well versed with the fact, if you are well versed with the technology, if you are comfortable enough to grow your own food at a large scale, you can go on and invest in the technical inputs and the devices that you can use at home. I would suggest start small. Start with a half half cut out plastic basket which is no longer in use for you. Maybe start at a in an earthen pot, fill it up with some soil and put some seeds in it and watch it grow. It's a learning process. You learn on the job. You do not have to go through a formal training. Of course, for other horticultural crops at a large scale, you have to have some sort of skills and training for plant cutting and pruning. But for a domestic scale, you don't need that many uh, that much input and that much training. I hope it answers your question.
Okay, the second question, I think again it is directed perhaps to Vishal. Can we have any small devices to recycle the used water at home level so we can use that for gardening?
Of course, there is a very let's say a primitive system for rainwater harvesting. You can just put a section of pipes and you can direct all of the rainwater to a underground pot which you can use for your gardening purposes, for your vegetable growing purposes. I'm not going to advise you to use the water that comes out of your washing machines and that comes out of your bath, which has particles of detergent and soap in it, which becomes very harmful for your consumption, as well as it is derogatory for the soil as well. But then you can use the water that comes out of the drain pipe of your air conditioners and the water that is being discharged by your reverse osmosis water filters at your home. It is completely perfect. It is rich in nutrients. It just has a very high TDS count that is deemed to be unsuitable for your consumption. But coming from a farm, I have been drinking the groundwater fairly a lot in the past few years, and I'm completely okay with that. It actually boosts your immunity. I am not advising you to drink groundwater, but I'm advising you to use your air conditioner drainage, your water filter drainage. Try to harvest the rainwater. There is a lot of rainfall happening in the country, fortunately, these days. It is unfortunate for the farmers, it is causing crop losses, but you can harness all that energy, you can harness all that water and use it for your purpose.
Okay, there are two questions for Anubhav. I think Anubhav, can you see that in your Q&A box? Yeah. Any case, I will read that for other people who can't see that. What alternative models can you glimpse for reconciling urbanization with agriculture?
I don't know if this is supposed to mean urbanization, okay. But anyway, so I think first we have to sort of, in as much as agriculture is concerned, we have to first recognize that there are two kinds of farmers that we're talking about here, right? First are farmers who are professionals trained in something else like Vishal, for example, like or Kapil, we were talking about Kapil. Kapil was talking yesterday. They are professionals and they have shifted to urban agriculture. You know, people like you and me who may want to grow something in our balconies and terraces. But at the same time, in a lot of Indian cities, you have farmers who are from families which have been farming for multiple generations now. And I am going to be talking about those. So first, if there are such farmers in our cities like they are in Delhi, we have to figure out how many of those farmers are interested in continuing with their occupation. How many of their younger generation is actually interested. We can think of authorizing, see, in our cities, we have a lot of unauthorized colonies and slums, and there are mechanisms to legalize them, to authorize them. There is a regulatory framework. If we can, in this city, Delhi, there are more than 1,600 unauthorized colonies, right? If I'm not mistaken. Now, if we can think of authorizing those unauthorized colonies, I think we can surely think of a way to authorize farming, right? So we need to think of legal and regulatory frameworks for farmers, traditional farmers who have been farming in cities. Can we also think of reviving the cooperative movement? Um, Vishal has spoken about cooperative farming, and Kapil yesterday hinted at it. And the cooperative movement is a very good example of how we can get different kinds of people together. And it doesn't necessarily have to be people from the same economic class. We can have various ideas of how a cooperative movement can come together. And the last point about this alternative idea is that, at least for Delhi, the next master plan, MPD 2041, is being conceived as we speak right now. I mean, not right now, but the planning for the next master plan, what the city will be for the next 20 years, is going on. And more of us, or lay citizens, we are not farmers. If we create a momentum that urban farming is something that we are interested in, that there are farmers, traditional farmers, who are already doing this in our city, and that this is something which is perhaps worth examining. Let us first examine this. It may have some disadvantages, it may have some advantages. Let us be open to examine it, and let us see if we can think of intervening in the planning process for the next master plan and have a framework to allow that plan. And we have historical examples of how this has happened in the past in our own city, in Delhi. This has happened, sanctioned by the. Should I move on to the next question by Shweta?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So Shweta and Aroparna have asked a similar question, which is about ownership. Now, the government of India is the owner of the 4 revenue estates. Now, so you see, in the rural stretch, for example, where Vishal is working, Parla village has farmers who own their land. They may have rented it out to other people, to entrepreneurs, or to migrant farmers. But in the urban stretch, the 4 revenue estates that I spoke about, all those 4 revenue estates belong to the government of India, and the government of India does not exercise ownership on its own. It then gives charge to various government organizations. In this case, it's the Delhi Development Authority, DDA. Some portions of those land also belong to the UP Irrigation Department, to PSUs like the Rajghat Thermal Power Corporation. A lot of farmers have filed cases in various courts, from district courts to the high courts. There's a case in the Supreme Court also challenging the ownership of these cake agencies over their land. But prima facie, it seems that most of the land belongs to the government of India. I wouldn't think of them as landless farmers. I think tenant farming is a very established model of agriculture. At least it used to be in the colonial times. They conceptually, you can think of them as I don't know. It's a very difficult thing to think of what kind of farming this is. It's not landless farmers. It's not essentially tenant farmers. They are occupying public land, but they also have some claim to that land because they've been on that land for around 60, 50 years now, illegally on that land for 60 or 50 years, and that gives them claim. Just like a Baskiwala, a Baski has a certain claim to rehabilitation and compensation if they've been around for a certain number of years. Similarly, a farmer should also have that claim. Unfortunately, in our city in Delhi, the government of Delhi and the central government have both denied those claims, and that has been contested in the courts. I also wanted to actually quickly, there was a question by Shashwati. And just to very quickly comment on this, I think be a general question, but I don't think urban farming is likely to become a challenge to rural farming. So I don't think it's likely to become so big and so pervasive that it will displace the rural economy. And this was discussed yesterday also. I think it's going to open up new ways of thinking for us as urban citizens and to complement rural farming, not really challenge. Those were all the questions for me. If there's any other question.
Thanks. There is Nandini's question to Jagrati. Successful farming looks after other creatures, including their valuable inputs to the activity. Farming has also an aspect of agroecology. So Jagrati, how do you factor in the high-tech methods that you have described?
So basically, I want to say few things. That is, first of all, it shouldn't be successful. I guess it could be sustainable farming. Sustainable is one where we see the blend of both the technology or the farming with the blend of the creatures. What she is saying, which I understand, is very traditional farming. It happens, and yes, I'm not going to defend the high tech farming methods like that. It is very sustainable. So it's still in an experimental phase, and whatever she is saying, that agroecology, so vertical farming is a kind of agroecology, but not totally, because again we are using artificial things like LED lights, then artificial buildings. So the use of manure or the animals or the fish, the use of like the fishes being used in agriculture, this won't happen totally. But when we talk about aquatic thing, the aquapolis, then there we can see that the seaweeds is also kind of farming where seaweeds are being grown with the fishes and other things. So it can be, but it's still in the experimental phase. So I cannot just say directly that there is a agroecology thing. It will take time to happen, because when there's a blend of technology and tradition, so it takes a lot of time.
Okay, Nandini's next question is, I think, directed to Vishal. What are the implications of agroforestry or food forests in your scheme of things? This helps in reducing water needs. There's a question mark after that. We are running our cooperative natural farms successfully in Noida. On the same lines, having built a partnership with landowners, talented farmer peasants, and city people on a very small scale, though. So, would you like to answer this question? Basically, she's saying that what are the implications of agroforestry or food forests in your scheme of things?
Agroforestry basically means you grow your own forest of foods. It is not a wild selection of plants that have grown in an area on their own. Agroforestry is carefully placing selected plants in a section of land, and they are allowed to grow freely, so that beyond a point they would be allowed to feed you crop or a fruit or any of, for example, nuts of any sort for your own need. It will definitely impact the water usage. Initially, you would have to water the plants extensively because these are very sensitive, delicate plants that require little bit of care during the initial years of their growth. However, beyond the point, these plants actually possess, this is quite scientific, these plants actually possess very deep tap roots so that they become self-sufficient beyond the point. You don't have to put in a lot of inputs, you don't have to put in a lot of water in the plants. They are very self-sufficient, and the shade that they provide, it prevents water loss from the ground. If the agroforest that you're establishing is around a water body, it will significantly impact the rate of evaporation of the water. So it does help in prevention of water losses from the surface, aside from providing you your selection of food. Reduction of water needs, definitely, it does become self-sufficient after a point. The huge trees, they have roots that are deep enough to source their water and their nutrients from the deeper layers of the soil. You don't have to put in much care into it beyond the point.
I think we are running past the time. We will take one more question which came before 4:15 from Madhava Rao. Hi, I'm part of Organic Terrace Gardening Forums from Bangalore, but these are still informal ones. Okay. Is there a possibility to give a formal structure to OTGs so that it can be a mass movement? I think it is again directed to perhaps Vishal or Jagrati. Vishal or Jagrati, would you like to respond to this?
Hi, Madhava, it's Vishal here. The part of your Organic Terrace Gardening Forums in Bangalore, it is still informal and it is still at a very small scale because not a lot of people take it up at a commercial scale to begin with. urban gardening, urban agriculture is still at a very nascent, a very delicate infant stage at this moment. I'd like to say that to you because people currently only do it for recreational purposes. People want to do it for landscaping purposes. The recent social media trends, like people are putting up small gardens at the rooftops just for the sake of good pictures, and it is not essentially for food provision. But as we recently have seen, people are shifting towards, let's say, growing their own foods at their own convenience in the vicinity of their homes, be it a roof, be it a balcony, be it a community ground, be it a playground in front of their houses. It will take time, of course. The network, I'm still not sure if you can formalize it because it requires a lot of legislation. That's why the government has still not ventured into it. It is a very huge open-ended domain, and no matter what policies you make, it is not a one-fits-all model. Every city, every every district in the same city, I should say, has a different climate, has a different weather, and possesses different challenges for the people. It has to be very well thought out, but the people actually can organize on their own. I
But
have seen.
after the pandemics, I think that this is one thing where the government should focus. And yeah, it's not going to be a mass movement suddenly, but definitely the people would think to grow some of the thing at their terrace or the way you are doing. Because after the pandemics, one thing which we have been like taught by the pandemic is that we need food than anything else. So yes, we need to do this in our terrace. So it's the realization of the people which will make it more and more important part of their life. So that is the thing.
Okay, thanks. We have 76 people in this webinar as of now. I mean, I think I would consult Madhuresh if we need to extend for 5 more minutes so that we can take a couple of more questions.
Sure, I think that's okay. If there are already some questions which have come in, and I think some of them, definitely what I can see, there is a concern regarding if it can be, how it can be. I think the concern is around the scale up. But I think there are two different aspects which from the questions what I can see is coming. One is that, okay, the question is of, and I think which we shall also try to add. One is the question of that for self-consumption, and the other is looking at the catering to the needs of the market. And I think that's where two different kinds of policy support which is required. One is like what the Madhav Rao ji is asking, that if the open terrace gardening is happening, then how do we actually make it a mass movement so that a lot of people can generate their own food, and at least if not food, cereals, the staple food, but the vegetables that can be a part of your food can be grown on your own. And I think that looks like a good option to begin with. And perhaps one has to look at how does government incentivizes it. Because a similar situation one can look at is producing your own electricity. There is a good amount of debate which is happening around the fact that putting up solar panels, and this question keeps coming in, is that if your consumption is 100 megawatts of electricity, 100 units of electricity, and you are producing, say, 20 units, then the government has found a way to grid integration. So government has found in grid integration, there are smart meters being put in. Similarly, there are innovations possible, and one can think of those solutions as well. But here it's very, it's in fact, government doesn't have to look up smart meters and things that you consume 5 kgs vegetables, you grow your 4 kgs, you could just buy one from the market. So I think more and more individual people start doing it, it can become a movement on its own. For that, the government support and perhaps is not needed. What is needed is, I think, the people like Vishal who are trying to farm on existing land, which the government is saying it's a criminal action. And I think that is where the intervention, like the presentation which Anubhav made today about that on the Yamuna floodplains to farm is illegal. It's a criminal activity. And I think that pressure generation from the people and from the civil society that farming is essential. So the change in approach, how we see cities, is somewhere I think one needs to look at. That is something which perhaps can address this wider question. Rather than looking at smaller things, that we do have power of our own, like a cycle movement. Now, if more and more, you have to think about the power of the people. That more and more people start cycling in the city, the government will have to start thinking of how to tailor their roads towards that. So if you start generating more vegetables, grow more vegetables, then the government will have to start thinking in terms of having less demand from the outside. And so how do you have an impact on the infrastructure which you are creating? So I see they are all linked. So you have a ripple effect in terms of how that leads to the larger questions can be looked at that way. Nishant, do you want to take more questions, or we can end here because it's an hour and a half?
Yeah, I think it's quite past the time. What we will do, if there are some attendees who want to stay, and there are at least one of the panelists who want to stay to respond to the questions, we can keep this going on. But the other panelists and the attendees can of course leave. And before we formally conclude this session, I really am thankful of Madhuresh for agreeing to moderate this session. This was a wonderful discussion. All the three panelists, their submissions and their review process and their patience throughout this whole months-long process. I must congratulate and thank them for their efforts. And thank you all for joining, because we had not started this webinar with this imagination that we would witness this kind of a huge participation. Today also, I think it was houseful. More than 100 people attended, participated in the discussion. It is quite an overwhelming experience for us. This is giving us an opportunity to bring even more people together. And in the next, in the remaining 2-3 days, we will be keen to learn further from the speakers and from the attendees, participants. So please keep spreading the word. We have increased the capacity of participation in this webinar to 500 now. And it would be really helpful if you can spread the word and bring more people to share their experiences and their and their questions. Primary expectation of this webinar is to bring together experiences as many and as diverse as possible. There's so many people who we want to thank for, especially the people who reviewed the work of the three panelists today. Thank you all. Thank you again, and see you all tomorrow. Those who want to stay, some of us will be leaving, but if you want to stay, and if there is one panelist here who want to respond to your questions, you can continue. This is formally to end this webinar. Thank you all again. See you tomorrow.